The mountains of northeastern Afghanistan do not forgive mistakes. They swallow men whole, bury secrets under rock and snow, and return nothing to the valleys below. In the winter of 2003, those mountains held a secret that the United States military would spend years trying to understand. A secret wrapped in shadow and silence. A secret that wore the face of a woman named Elena Vasquez. Elena was born in a small border town in New Mexico. The daughter of a Mexican-American schoolteacher and a former Marine who spent more time cleaning his rifle than talking to his children. She grew up in a house where silence was a language, where you learned more from what people did not say than from what they did. Her father believed that strength was something you carried quietly, that the loudest person in the room was never the most dangerous one. Elena absorbed that lesson the way desert sand absorbs heat, slowly and completely, until it became part of her own temperature. She was not the kind of girl who stood out in high school. She was medium height, with dark hair she kept pulled back, brown eyes that held a stillness most people found unsettling without knowing why. She ran track not because she was the fastest, but because she understood pacing, understood how to make her body do exactly what she asked of it without complaint. She read constantly, not the novels her classmates preferred, but history, geography, military strategy, languages. By the time she graduated, she could speak functional Spanish and Farsi, had taught herself basic Arabic from cassette tapes borrowed from the public library, and had read every book on guerrilla warfare the county library system carried. Her father noticed. He said nothing about it for 3 years. Then one evening, when Elena was 19 and working as a cashier at a grocery store while she figured out what to do with her life, he placed a single pamphlet on the kitchen table and walked back to his chair. It was a recruitment brochure for the Defense Intelligence Agency. He never said a word about it. He did not need to. The path from that kitchen table to the mountains of Afghanistan was not a straight line. It never is for the people who end up in those places. Elena enlisted in the army first, because the DIA required real-world experience before they would look at you seriously, and because she knew that you could not understand intelligence unless you understood the ground it came from. She went through basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, finished near the top of her class, and was assigned to military intelligence. She had a gift for languages that her instructors described in their evaluations as almost eerie. She could hear a language spoken for 30 minutes and begin identifying its patterns. Within weeks, she could hold basic conversations. Within months, she was nearly fluent. She added Pashto to her list during her first deployment to Afghanistan in 2001, learning it from local interpreters who found her intensity both flattering and slightly frightening. Her first tour was officially unremarkable. She processed signals intelligence, sat through briefings, filled out forms, did the invisible work that keeps military operations running but never makes it into the stories people tell. But she was watching everything. She was learning the terrain, the people, the way information moved and where it stopped. She was learning which local contacts could be trusted and which ones were playing both sides of a conflict that had been running longer than she had been alive. She was building something inside her head, a map that was more than geography, a map of human loyalties and fears and pressures. When she rotated back to the United States in late 2001, she applied to the DIA and was accepted. The evaluation process took 11 months. She passed every test they gave her. There was one evaluator, a retired Army colonel named Hartman, who wrote in his assessment that Elena Vasquez possessed a quality he had only encountered 3 times in 30 years of intelligence work. He called it operational invisibility. He meant that she had an instinctive understanding of how to be present without being noticed, how to gather information from environments that were actively hostile to the gathering of information. He recommended her without reservation. The training that followed was unlike anything she had experienced in the Army. She learned surveillance and counter-surveillance, document forgery, dead drops, the construction and management of human intelligence networks. She learned how to build a cover identity so thoroughly that it could survive deep background investigation. She learned how to read people, how to find the pressure points that made them talk or made them useful, how to disappear from a room in a way that left people unable to remember exactly when she had left or what she had been wearing. She trained with special operations units, learning their tactics and their culture, understanding how they thought and what they needed and where they were most vulnerable to failure. She was assigned her call sign during a field exercise in the deserts of Nevada, a joint operation between DIA assets and a Delta Force unit that was designed to test communication and coordination under realistic stress conditions. The exercise involved extracting a simulated hostage from a location defended by role-players who did not know they were participating in a test. Elena was supposed to be playing a support role, feeding intelligence to the extraction team from a position 3 kilometers away. Instead, she walked through the front door of the defended compound, talked her way past 2 checkpoints using a cover story she had constructed on the spot, located the simulated hostage, and walked back out again. The extraction team found her waiting at the rally point with the target 15 minutes before they were scheduled to begin their assault. The Delta unit commander, a hard-edged officer named Reyes, who had done 3 combat tours and did not impress easily, looked at her for a long moment after she briefed what had happened. Then he said quietly that she moved through hostile environments like something that was not quite visible, like a shadow that had decided to walk around on its own. He asked her what her call sign was. She did not have one yet. He told her she needed one. She thought about it for a moment, standing in the Nevada desert with the sun going down behind the mountains, and she said quietly that she thought Dark Angel suited her well enough. Reyes laughed, a short sound that was mostly surprise. The name stuck. By 2003, she had run operations in 3 countries. She had built a network of informants in the tribal areas along the Afghan-Pakistani border that was producing intelligence no satellite or signals platform could replicate. She worked alone most of the time, or with a single local handler who went by the name Tariq, and who had survived 3 decades of Afghan conflict by trusting almost no one. He trusted Elena because she had once pulled him out of a situation in Kandahar that should have ended with his death, and because she had never once misled him about what she was doing or why. In a world built on deception, she had been straight with him. He found this remarkable enough that he chose to stay alive for her. The operation that would define her, and eventually consume her, began with a single piece of information that arrived in a report from a source so far down the chain that it almost did not get read. A Taliban commander in Kunar province had been observed meeting with individuals who were not local, who spoke Arabic rather than Pashto, and who had arrived and departed in vehicles with Pakistani license plates that did not match any registered series in the database. The report was flagged, buried in a stack of similar reports, and might have stayed there forever if Elena had not happened to be in the regional intelligence center that day reviewing something else entirely. She read the report 3 times. Then she pulled every other report from that region over the previous 8 months and read those too. She was looking for a pattern, and she found one, not obvious. Not the kind of thing that jumped out at you, but there in the data, if you knew how to look. A rhythm of movement and contact that suggested something was being built. Something patient and careful and very large. She brought her analysis to her supervisor, a DIA officer named Caldwell, who had been in the intelligence world for 20 years, and who had learned to trust his instincts about analysts who themselves had good instincts. Caldwell listened to her for 40 minutes without interrupting. When she finished, he asked her 2 questions. The first was whether she could put together a full written assessment. The second was whether she was willing to go back into Kunar province to verify what she had found. She said yes to both without hesitation. What neither of them knew, what no one at that point fully understood, was that the pattern Elena had identified was not simply a local operational network. It was the leading edge of something that would reshape the conflict in ways that planners had not anticipated. And it had already identified her. The mountains were watching. They always were. The briefing that sent her into the field happened on a Tuesday in November 2003, in a room with no windows and a door that needed a 6-digit code to open. There were 7 people in that room. By the following spring, 3 of them would be dead. One would have resigned from government service under circumstances that were never made public. and Elena Vasquez would have vanished completely from every official record that acknowledged her existence. Cunar Province in winter is a different world from the one that appears on maps and in briefing slides. The maps show roads and villages and elevation contours. The briefing slides show threat assessments and known enemy positions and projected movement corridors. What neither the maps nor the slides can show is the cold that gets inside your bones and stays there. The way the mountains seem to close in around you at night. The sound of wind moving through narrow passes. That could be wind or could be something else entirely. Elena Vasquez had been in Cunar before, but she had never been this deep, this far from any position that could be called safe. She crossed into the operational area on the third night of December 2003, moving on foot with 2 local guides that Tariq had vetted personally over a period of months. The guides knew 3 things about her: that she spoke Pashto well enough to pass as someone who had grown up with it under certain conditions, that she paid what she promised and did not bargain once a price was set, and that she was not to be questioned about where she was going or why. This last condition they accepted because Tariq had told them to, and because they had learned over the years that the people Tariq vouched for were worth vouching for. The special operations team she was supposed to be working with, 6 soldiers from a ranger battalion that had been attached to a classified direct action unit, were positioned 12 kilometers to the west in a forward operating base that was essentially 3 buildings surrounded by HESCO barriers and a great deal of determination. Their commander was a captain named Walsh, who was 28 years old and had done 2 previous deployments to Afghanistan. He was good at his job in the way that young officers sometimes are, not because he had seen everything, but because he had not yet learned to be afraid of the things he had not seen. Elena had met him at the staging area 3 days earlier and spent 2 hours briefing him on the operational area. He had listened well, asked smart questions, and told her that he would follow her intelligence lead without argument. She trusted this as far as she trusted anything in a situation like that, which was carefully and with reservations she kept to herself. The village she was moving toward was called Darband, which meant narrow pass in Dari, and it sat at an elevation of nearly 8,000 feet in a valley that was accessible by exactly 1 road in summer and by essentially no road in winter. The people who lived there had been surviving in that specific piece of terrain for generations, and they had the particular quality of mountain communities everywhere, a self-sufficiency that was not unfriendliness, but that absolutely did not extend to strangers who arrived without introduction. Elena had an introduction. It had taken 8 months to build. The introduction came through a woman named Amira, who was the wife of the village headman and who had been, in a previous chapter of her life, educated in Kabul before the Taliban closed the schools and made her world very small. Amira had a younger brother who had gone to Pakistan to study and had made contacts there that had eventually led him into a world he had not fully understood before he entered it. By the time he understood it, he was already too deep inside to leave without consequences. Amira knew this. She had been living with the weight of it for 2 years. What she needed was a way out for her brother that did not end with his body in a ditch. Elena had found this out through Tariq, who had found it out through a chain of relationships that stretched back through the border regions and involved 3 languages and at least 7 degrees of separation. She had spent 4 months building a communication channel with Amira that was secure enough to be trusted and simple enough to be maintained without technical infrastructure. By the time she crossed into Cunar Province in December 2003, she and Amira had exchanged 32 messages, none of them longer than 3 sentences, all of them apparently about the price of cooking oil and the health of various animals. The codes were Elena's own construction, built from a system she had developed during her training and refined through 2 years of operational use. Her supervisors knew the general framework. They did not know every variation. This was intentional on her part, not out of any desire for secrecy from her own side, but because she had learned that the safest secret is the one that lives in his future.